Hello. Welcome everyone to another episode of Role Playing Guys. This is Spencer happening here for another quick intro. As you know, this is the review episode of our Season 8 and our exploration of the game Deadlands. In this episode, we discuss what we liked and what we didn't like about this game, as well as if we'd recommend it to anyone. Anyway, as a reminder, we love hearing game suggestions from our listeners. We love getting games from indie game developers. If you have a game that you have made or you want to hear a specific TTRPG in a podcast, please let us know and we'll put it on our ever-growing list of games to test and review. As we continue our journey to review and discuss more games, we invite you to tell others about the podcast and rate and subscribe to it yourself. And if you have convinced somebody to check out the show, please let us know. We'd love to hear more from you. Thank you so much to our patrons over the Patreon, Brad, Joe, Steven, and Sir Guy. You are the food dye to our Cheetos. Without you, we'd be a lumpy gray mess. Additionally, please continue to listen to the guidance of the experts regarding the pandemic of COVID-19. That's all I have. Let's get to the episode.
Yeah,
I have to start still?
Yeah.
Oh, man. How do I start this one?
However you want.
Welcome everyone to the role-playing guys. Here we're doing a whatever,
okay.
I mean...
Welcome everyone to...
Can't do it now. About that, though. That's about right.
I can't do it now, okay. Welcome everyone to the Role-Playing Guys. We're going to be doing our review of Deadlands today. Okay, I'm Rebecca. With me are Tyler.
That's me. Spencer.
I'm right here.
And Nick.
I'm last because I'm obviously least.
I go
let's have a little pity party for Nicholas.
I go clockwise,
pity party
not
for
counterclockwise.
He's a sad boy.
So, you can take it away now. I'm done.
So, in this episode, we're going to be discussing the game of Deadlands. We finished our season in it, Season 8, that Rebecca was the Grand Marshal for. It was a great season. It was a lot of fun. It was a very interesting game, and I'm excited to hear everybody's thoughts about it as we go through it. As listeners know, we have a few criteria that we use in order to be able to judge the game, and we'll just go one by one discussing it. Does anybody have strong feelings about going first, discussing the general concept and the setting?
I honestly thought it was great.
Yeah.
Maybe we should start with Rebecca, and then I guess Rebecca can choose which direction we go around the proverbial circle, and then
popcorn.
Yeah, if you want.
I gave it 10 out of 10. I feel like the setting and concept were very solid and fairly unique and interesting. So, Tyler?
That makes sense. I was saying that out of all the role-playing games we played, I thought it was a very interesting locale. I didn't go into all the reading of the different, the lore and everything behind it, but I really like the alternate history, so things are familiar, but then adding all of the crazy supernatural and futuristic sci-fi and mysticalness of it into a Wild West Western kind of theme. So I loved it. I thought it was really well done theme setting wise.
Who's next, Ty?
Yeah, I guess we're popcorning this according to Spencer.
We're popcorning? Nick, go.
Okay. The score I gave for the setting and the general concept was a 9 out of 10. Maybe I should have put 10 out of 10 because I don't really have any criticisms about the setting. I think it's, like others said, it's highly imaginative. It's not only is Wild West slightly less common, at least I think, in tabletop RPGs, but the fact that it is Weird West as well. You take a little slice of Ravenloft flavoring, a few pinches of Cthulhu Mythos flavoring, and you've got yourself the Weird West, basically. So some of it, I guess my one criticism would be it might take a little bit to explain some of this stuff, like the whole Manto thing and whatever, but pretty solid overall, I'd say.
You just gotta learn them vocab words.
Yeah, there's a little bit of research you need to do to get used to this clever setting. So
wouldn't that be more learning curve?
Well, yeah, but this was specific to the concept. Anyway, Spencer, go ahead.
I, like Nick, gave it a 9 out of 10. There are 3 reasons that I rated it so high, and one reason that I rated it not a 10. So the first has already been hit on by everybody, that it's the combination of Western and horror that feels really unique to this. It's not. It's pretty dissimilar to anything that we have played in this in our podcast, and it's also different than what I've seen just in reading and just in general. I don't feel like it's a very common combination of two genres together. Second, I really like that the game or the idea goes beyond this book only. It's the first in either a trilogy or a quadrilogy or a series with this theme of horror starting to creep into the world and taking over. So it starts with Deadlands, then there is like a noir theme, and then I feel like it's a Cold War or something like that, and then there's
some apocalypse things.
Yeah,
somewhere.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun because it gives you the genesis of that whole story. So if you have the interest, you can continue beyond this book, and that's pretty cool to have that. Third, I thought that the mechanics played into the general concept really well. They leaned into the way that things are done. For example, with shooting and with combat, it felt like they were developed together as opposed to the mechanics just being an afterthought or the theme being an afterthought. So I thought those combination was really good. The only thing that I have as a complaint against this is I felt like some of the monsters weren't original. I mean, yes, you have the Mantos, and that was cool and original, but was it all that original? I mean, that feels like a Revenant in another game. You know, it seemed like there are cool things in it, but there are also just that little thing detracts from it. You know, it's the same reason that I can't say that Pathfinder is a totally original concept, because it's not? No, not at all. It's basically Dungeons and Dragons with a different name and like more stats. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but you know that's what I mean. Like if I'm going to give something a 10 out of 10 on this, I want it to be just that next level of originality.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes so much. That's a lot. Yeah, I gave it a 9 also, so I forgot to say that. But yeah, so there you go. I think that's everybody's thoughts and opinions on the setting.
Yes, now Spencer needs to popcorn. Who gets to answer the learning curve first?
All
so
right,
game works.
We'll start with Nick. We'll send it right back. Back at you, babe.
Okay, cool. Learning curve.
Higher is easier, lower is harder.
Frick, I did it backwards.
Whoa.
Why did I do that? Okay, no. We're doing okay. Actually, no, we'll do that. Okay. Making sure that I have my score set before I'm like influenced by others. Anyway,
yes.
I had it at 9 for some reason, but I forgot that. I forgot that a good learning curve is higher up. Whatever. Learning curve. I gave it a 4 for a couple different reasons. First of all, rules we've talked about it being a bit more rather on the crunchy side, honestly, and also there are a lot of new mechanics in here which you don't really see in other places, which I mean, there's some good things about that. It's good to be different. But there were several things, especially with implementing the chips and the card system, that took a bit of getting used to. On top of all of the stuff with all the combat stuff, we had to draw a bunch of flow charts and cheat sheets and everything. So I was considering making it lower, like a 3 or a 2, but I didn't, mainly because it could be interesting and fun to go into that learning curve, if that makes sense. Learning curve is still high, but the fact that they make it different and perhaps rather fun and interesting by implementing, different props and things, like, implementing cards, implementing chips, poker chips kind of thing, implementing cards for magic, that kind of thing. So there you go. Let's hear from Tyler now.
I gave it a 5. I didn't think it was really that difficult of a learning curve compared to other games that we've played. So, and I also think we probably didn't play all of the rules that we were supposed to be playing to begin with, but
That's a fair point.
But also, like, to me, it wasn't that hard once we got the hang of it. I think since we, like, had to learn the game extremely quickly and, play it for a podcast, we always feel like it's a little bit more difficult. But, I mean, at least I've played other games that are kind of similar, like, rolling hit locations and all that stuff. But the only thing that was kind of clunky. I would just say the clunkiness wasn't like smooth in the transition of the attack rolls to damaging to wounds to all the different small things. It probably could have streamlined it a little bit, but it wasn't the worst game I've played. It was definitely a little bit better than Wrath and Glory, I think, personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's me. Rebecca.
I give it a 3 out of 10. I had a lot of stuff, and there are a lot of mechanics that as a GM you have to keep track of, and some of them I basically used maybe once and then kind of forgot about because I had all these pages of notes of things I had to keep track of. So, I mean, you definitely had to learn a lot in order to be able to lead this.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm sure the GM section of it is probably atrocious to read, so.
I mean, it's like half the manual.
Yeah.
So.
But at least it wasn't like a whole new book, right?
True that.
I have quite a few thoughts about the GM section, actually, and this is the first game. This is the first game that I didn't GM that I actually have thoughts about the GM portion, but. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Rebecca, because I also gave it a 3 out of 10.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with Ty that after you get the handle of it, as a player, it kind of becomes quick to do. But at the same time, there are some mechanics that we barely even touched. Like we didn't really go into fear. We didn't really go into magic. Combat was the biggest mechanic that we really dived into this season, and still, like, we constantly forgot about rolling for wind and doing the vigor checks, and I felt like those fun mechanics are just added on that make it a little bit slower and a little bit more difficult to play. And I mean, like Ty said and like Nick said, it was still fun to learn, but I think we almost did a disservice to the game and might have put some people off because we played it in a podcast form and we weren't able to dive into some of those more deep aspects of the game more easily because we also wanted to make it listenable. How fun is it to listen to somebody to look up rules and discuss them for 5 minutes? It just isn't. So I think I gave it a 3 out of 10 because it is a tricky game to learn. I don't think it is something that you can pick up and is as rules light as Numenera, where it's like no rules essentially.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Why don't we go back to Rebecca for character creation? I don't know if you'll have any thoughts about this, but
maybe.
It was complicated enough that generally when I had to do NPCs, because they gave some suggestions, but basically what I would do is look in the back of the book for someone somewhat similar, and then fudge their stats to meet more where I felt like that character was, instead of actually trying to create a character. So, having not created a character, but only seen it, I gave it like a 6 out of 10, because I didn't do it. If I'd done it, I probably maybe would have rated it lower, but I don't really know. So, Nick.
Okay. So, I actually also gave character creation a 6 out of 10. The main reason for it is that there were times I was a bit lost as to what exactly to do for character creation. Part of it may have also been that I was trying to, I remember I was trying to find a character that quote-unquote filled in the gaps of the rest of the party, which may not always be the best approach to creating a character. I was trying to find something that would be good for long range, like ranged attacks, but that also kind of like made sense and whatever. I also wanted to try to do something different, try something that probably no one else was doing, and so that's how I came up with a gold panner who was good at rifle shooting and everything. And who also threw dynamite and all that.
His
So,
favorite part. of the
Very,
whole game.
very talented at throwing dynamite. Yes.
I mean, it was all worth it and everything.
You hit your
And I
targets.
actually, yeah, it's true. And actually, I do really much appreciate the sort of like suggestions they have. But yeah, it felt a bit loose to me sometimes as to like what exactly I could do. It was still fun overall. Maybe 6 is being a little mean, but there you go. Let's go with Tyler.
I gave it a 7. I thought it was fairly unique in terms of like the characters you could create. I really like the hindrances and the edges. Was it edges?
Yeah, hindrances and edges.
Hindrances, yeah. I like that a lot. That was the part I think was the most interesting for me, was like I could take on more negative traits, and in response I could get more basically benefits to my character. I like that trade-off. And I also thought it was kind of fun in the fact that there wasn't really like character classes. They had like concepts that
Maybe
you could
that was
build
one thing that
to-
kind of like threw me off a bit. Like maybe I've been too dependent on classes, and maybe I shouldn't be and stuff. But concepts, yeah.
Yeah, so it was more like you made a concept, and then you built around that concept, and they had like things that could guide you in the right direction to make that concept happen. But it was all up to you about what skills you wanted, what abilities, what hindrances and edges. So I thought that was awesome. But that's me. So Spencer.
Yeah, originally I had an 8, but after listening to your guys' reasons and thinking about my reasons again, I think a 7 is actually really fair for it, because I like the idea that it is more open concept. I think that's fun. What I really liked about it, though, was the randomness factor that gets thrown in there with the cards that you draw, because it also made it so it wasn't an intuitive thing of I'm just going to put the highest dice on the highest
that's
on
true
the
too.
strongest trait that I want. You had to
Yeah.
think, oh, maybe I want to have a 48 on what I really want to be good at, instead of having a 1d12 there, because more dice in the pool is hypothetically better. So I thought that was a fun factor of it, because it made the character creation process more of a thinking thing, instead of having default dice pools and default stats. And I thought that was also one of the things that made it not so great at the same time, because it unlike a lot of other games where you can just kind of, if you lose your character sheet, you can make one up like on the spot. With Deadlines, you actually have to like sit down and make a character. It isn't the instantaneous, random character that you can create. You have to put a little bit more thought into it, and I like that, but I also disliked it. So
I guess one more thought I would say regarding this is we've complained about the character sheet before.
my gosh.
Yeah, it's nasty.
And it was, there's a lot of creative stuff in like the various attributes and traits and everything. But
Finding anything.
it was
on
fun. It was hard to
pain.
find things. That was one of the main things. And also, I realized too late that I should have invested more points in more skills or attributes, whatever it is, whatever they call it.
Should use your chips to level up.
I did not use any chips to level up. I was saving them for
situation
moments that I needed, situations, and
How'd
so
that
which,
work out for you?
I mean, it worked out
It worked
great.
really well. It saved his
Actually.
He
life.
was surrounded.
Till the end.
Until the end, of course, but he almost died in the
He
cave.
accomplished everything he wanted.
Yeah.
He accomplished everything he wanted. Aaron Cox did, but yeah, the character sheet is just, and some of the stuff with the attributes was there should be some design, maybe I mean, this is maybe future version. Maybe there are future versions that are better. I don't know.
No, I agree with Nick. I think that also brings up a really good point of, like, traits versus aptitudes. Like, screw traits. I don't know how else to say it. Like, you don't really roll many trait checks. Everything is aptitude. So, like, why not just, like, always invest in aptitudes, you know? Like, unless you're upgrading your dice, only upgrade your aptitudes, because that's what actually you roll consistently. I thought that's something that is a little bit goofy when you think about it, because you don't get a bonus for being really good in strength. You get a bonus for being really good at... Strength is a bad example. There aren't any aptitudes for it. But, like, you don't get a bonus for being good at cognition. You get a bonus for being good at search.
Yeah.
That's there. So, I thought that's a strange thing.
It's clever. It's clever to have, like, dice types tied to, like, aptitudes. But, yeah, it makes a lot more sense to increase the number of dice you roll as opposed to 1d8 to 1d10. That's not as big as having 2d8.
Exactly, yeah. The potential is so much, so different. So I guess I was the last one again. Yeah. And Tyler's eating, so I'll go with Nick.
I got them chicken nuggets.
Why don't you go to balance, Nick?
Okay, great. Balance. So if I'm not mistaken, this refers more to, like, how balanced the different player options are in the game. And I put an 8 here. I felt it was honestly pretty good. Okay.
I am morally offended.
Speaking from experience, I felt just as useful as anybody else. Like when... I mean...
Yeah, I agree with Nick.
Okay.
No, you're good.
No, I want to hear why. I'm interested.
Okay, well...
I'm intrigued a little.
I'm fascinated, I am.
Okay, well, I guess maybe I didn't pay as much attention to the rest of you players as I thought I did with your reaction there, but yeah, I mean, I was tempted to go for some of the more interesting options regarding magic or, you know, using cards, using other mechanics and things like that. I went for something pretty straightforward, which was just stand back and shoot something. Sure. And it was, I mean, I got like what I thought was a standard rifle, and it was really good.
Incredibly powerful, actually.
And so, and I guess maybe I guess now I'm thinking about it, I probably did like deal like a lot of damage. But when it comes to options, I didn't have a lot of options specifically, really. I did have one ability that I didn't actually end up using. There was something about like lazy eye or evil eye or something like that, where like if I had to roll a check to like, you know, run away or something to flee, then I can basically like stand my ground a bit more or something. What was it?
Well, you played into that a lot. Like, your character definitely did that.
Narratively, yeah, I did. Narratively. Let's see. Oh, yeah, sorry. Nerves of Steel. If I fail a guts check to flee, I can stand my ground. Well, the stare, that was +2 to overall if they can see my stare. So I suppose I could have used some of that. But anyway, there are lots of options, lots of different concepts, and I think... a lot of them are viable and interesting to explore in the setting. That's why I gave it an 8. Let's go with Rebecca.
I gave it a 5 out of 10. I feel like it can go either way. If you're careful, you can make it a very balanced game, but if you're not careful, you can very quickly become very unbalanced. Like, I mean, you had Spencer's character whose biggest thing was talking. And... playing it cool, essentially, and tricking people. And then I know Tyler, like, magic kept being not as effective as you thought it. I feel like you felt like magic wasn't quite as effective as you thought it would be, because you ended up switching over to guns fairly often.
Yeah, I'll talk about that during my turn, basically.
Your character was solid, but, like, if you had a bunch of characters who all picked things that weren't necessarily going to fight, like, you could very easily unbalance things.
Well, I mean, like, overall, all three of our characters had their own, like, contributed to the story in a significant way. I'd like
Yeah,
to think.
but
So,
what I'm saying is it's very easy. You have to put effort into balancing the game. I feel like the characters.
okay, I see what you mean.
Spencer.
Yeah, I gave it a 5 out of 10. The first thing that comes to mind of something that was terribly imbalanced were the weapons and the gear. I had a pistol, and it did like 1d6 damage. Nick's rifle did 5d10. Like, that's insane. The comparison there isn't there. And granted, I wasn't going to use my gun, and I could have gotten something better. But at the same time, like, that right there is just such a vast difference that it's just crazy. The second thing that I thought of was magic, and Ty is probably going to go into this more, but unless you invested a lot into magic, it was a throwaway stat.
Yeah.
There's no point in it. Exactly. And then the last thing that I thought made the game super unbalanced was the decision to upgrade things. Because as soon as you start saying, I'm not going to use my chips during the game, and I'm just going to save them to upgrade in between episodes or in between sessions, you can have a player who is so much farther ahead than any of the other players.
Yep.
And they're rolling d10s and d12s and dice pools of 4 or 5, while other players are just rolling like a 1d6 or a 2d6 or whatever. Like, it very quickly becomes unbalanced because of the leveling up process. And I like the ability that you have to make that decision to upgrade at a different rate. But I think it also, without any limitations, it's going to make players so vastly different that it would quickly be a not competitive game. And Ty, why don't you go for it?
I gave it a 6. You know, generally speaking, like, when you make your characters and you start playing, like, everyone's very balanced. Like, everyone's able to contribute, especially if you pick different skills and abilities that kind of complement where other people are lacking, which I think we were able to do fairly well. There was a lot of things that we couldn't cover just because character creation didn't give us enough to be able to, you know, expand a ton. But like you said, the leveling up process was very easy, I would say. Like, you get 3 chips pretty much every session, and technically you'd be getting XP when you play other games, of course, every session. But it just seemed like the benefits that you got from using your chips to level up was fairly high for kind of a low cost, like a low trade-off, you know? Because, like, the chips, like, yeah, I gave you, like, an extra dice roll for 1 dice roll, you know? But I could spend that same chip and, like, level up my stat to give me 2 dice in the future. Yeah, and always have
always
it.
Have that
yeah,
extra
you could
dice.
always have it there. So I can see what you mean as the, like, leveling up could make people seem weaker if they weren't using their chips correctly. But then again, it's like, it's your fault for not using them correctly, you know? I do kind of like the concept of having, like, varied levels of characters, kind of. That's, you don't really see that very often in role-playing games because, you know, generally people want it to be like, hey, we're all on the same plane, we're all even, you know? But in real life, that's not how it is. Like, there's going to be some people that are more skilled than you. So I kind of like that aspect of it. But in terms of, like, magic, for example, I thought it was too hard. It was too difficult. Unless you maxed out the skill, it was almost, like, impossible to get the spells off because it wasn't just you had to get the roll to do it. You also had to, like, draw cards, which I thought was cool to begin with. I'm like, oh, this is kind of playing into the whole Western theme. But then it's like, okay, I have to get, like, a 2-pair. Okay, I got a 2-pair, but that only does, like, 6 wind damage, you know? But the next one's like, I have to get, like a match of certain colors. And it was really difficult to meet those prerequisites to do even like the minimal amount of damage that I could just do with like a gun or like a rifle that automatically hits if I roll like a 5, you know? So I think that's like one big glaring issue if you want to do magic is you have to just invest in that and just be good at that and specialize and focus in that one aspect. But generally speaking, I thought it was relatively balanced when you start off mostly. But yeah, I thought my thoughts. And I think everyone went for that. So now we are in gameplay combat. And I'm just going to pick myself to go. So how about that?
Breaks the rules.
I'm going to break the rules right now and pick myself. I think if we played combat in the way that it should have been, it probably would have been like an 8. I think if you were to play this in person or over a virtual tabletop where you could like position yourself, use cover, like know the distance between attacks, I think it would make combat even better just because we're playing it over a distance podcast format. It's kind of hard to do that and show everyone what we're trying to do. But I like combat. I like crunchy combat where you have lots of options. So I thought it was great. Spencer, go.
What did you give it though?
Oh, 8.
So I give it a 9. I agree with Ty. I love crunchy combat. It's miserable for a listener, but it's a lot of fun to play because, like Ty said, the crunchier the combat I feel, a lot of the time it's because it's giving you more options, more things that you can do. So if you have more of that, then it's a lot more fun. I thought that it was really a game that should be played either in person or, like Ty said, over a virtual tabletop, because there are some awesome modifiers that you don't get when you're just doing everything verbally. So, like, you don't get the modifier of, like, moving versus stationary or cover. Like, those are some basic things. Or range modifier. Those are some very basic things that when you're doing everything verbally, you can't visualize them. It's not nearly as easy as saying, oh, this box is 5 yards, so you can automatically see the difference.
Like being able to measure it out.
Mm-hmm. I think if we were to do it that way, it would be a 10. But yeah, without actually playing it, I can't in good conscience rate it a 10. Rebecca, what do you think?
I gave it a 7 out of 10, largely because of the lack of, like, group combat.
Like a mob.
So, like, when I had a group of people, there was no easy way to handle that, which made it kind of a pain, and that was why I just decided that a bunch of people were knocked out and not getting up, because it was too hard.
From the GM perspective, quite different than our play.
Seriously.
But, I mean, overall, I did like the combat system. Once you got down how the dice rolls worked, I felt like it was interesting, especially the idea of, like, wind and stun, because, yeah, you take a good blow, you may not be able to just shake it off.
Yeah, that was cool. I like that a lot, because it's, like, a whole nother aspect of getting down, not just HP, but, like, you're so winded you can't even move anymore, so that's cool.
I guess that's, to me, I gave combat an 8. I may not be the biggest fan of the more crunchy type of combat, but I am impressed with the combat system nonetheless. I also like the fact that your health is not the only factor on whether or not you can fight, which is kind of like what Wrath and Glory did with their with the various kind of like numbers up to range.
It wasn't wind. It was like soak. Wasn't it?
Soak, yep.
Yeah.
Soak and your actual health and things like that. I do like that approach. There's kind of resource management in that sense. And it did take a while to understand how combat would work, but once we got into it, I really liked it because you don't just rely on dice rolls, you rely on like cards, and not just that, like you've the thing I especially like about using cards as opposed to dice for deciding something is the fact that a dice can be any number at any time, but a deck has a certain number of things left. And so if you look in the discard pile, you can see, okay, so we have these and these. What are the odds that I'll get something like this? It adds a little bit more drama and suspense, at least to me anyway. I find that a lot of fun, being able to use cards. And also chips in combat as well. Even though I didn't use them at all to level up, I used them all in combat. And that was great, except at the end, as we've established. So, yeah. I didn't give combat a 10 because, again, this is not my favorite approach to combat. But I appreciate how thorough it is and how it, I appreciate Crunchy Combat for the fact that you have the mechanics tell you a more definite picture of what's actually happening to each person. Where they're wounded, how they're wounded, how it's affecting them, things like that.
And the cards are kind of fun because then hey, if I've been freaking drawn it super hot in the beginning of the session, I'm going to be running out of luck eventually because I'm using all the good cards.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's kind of like, just fun moments like that. Or you keep getting a bunch of low cards and you're like, okay, I got to get a lucky break sometime. Mm-hmm. It's like what people say for dice except for real.
Plus the dynamic of being able to sleeve cards too. That was a fun thing that
yes.
I think I was the only one that did it. But it was fun to be able to like jump in and use it at any point.
Yeah, we never really used that.
It might be cool. Might be cool to see if a TTRPG can incorporate more card cheats, essentially, or like some of those sleight of hand sorts of things. Not actual like card sleight of hand, but ways to manipulate the cards more if you had more abilities to do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's see. I'm left with exploration. I'll go ahead and start with exploration. Why not?
Oh, he pulled a Tyler.
So I gave exploration a 6. The main way that the setting is great. I love the setting, of course. The way that we explore the setting, though, is mainly through all of those aptitudes and traits and things like that, which I wasn't. I don't think we in general were a huge fan of how it was all organized. We often struggled to figure out exactly which trait to use for a certain thing. Some were obvious, such as, with things like tracking or shooting or whatever. But for some like edge cases or whatever, like you could see arguments for different things. I'm sure the rule book would like specify more like what they each mean. But the mechanics of exploration, doesn't seem to be a whole lot there, more so than any other TTRPG that I've seen. So, but I didn't have any like specific complaints other than that. So a 6. Let's go with Spencer.
I give it an 8. And the same reasons that Nick had his complaints are the reasons that I liked it. Because I like when there's overlap in aptitudes to the point that it doesn't make one null. You could argue it multiple ways. You could say I would say that this is more performance than it is persuasion. And, discussing with the marshal, you'd be able to make your case and to make that decision. And I also like that in this game, you used a lot of the aptitudes, or you used more than just 5. It was possible to use quite a few things, and there are some that were really specific, like Nick said, but then there are some that were pretty wide and vague, like scrounging. That's a really interesting idea that could be used in a lot of situations instead of just using a general search or whatever. You can have more specific or unique instances of uses, and I like that a lot. Let's go with Ty.
I gave it a 5. I thought it was kind of so-so in exploration. I thought it was hard to explore because you just initially didn't have enough skills to be able to do it effectively. So I felt like we had to like really rely on Rebecca's story to be able to find out what was happening in a way, you know? Like
Do you think that was more than other games, though?
No, I don't. That's why I just gave it a 5. It was just kind of the same as most other games, like nothing too different or unique about it. But that was me. So the next one is, I think, role playing, which we'll go with Nick.
Rebecca.
Or, sorry, Rebecca.
Rebecca
I'm
did-
sorry.
Rebecca did not give her.
Rebecca, go. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's all good. I gave it an 8 out of 10 as well. I feel like there were a fair number of options. I also like the way that you can more... Like, the way I tended to take it as the Marshal is if you could explain to me why your approach was more of, say, a persuasive approach or more of a performance approach, I'm willing to... Like, if you can make a good case for the approach you want to take and the skill you want to use, I'm willing to do it if it works. And there were a fair number of options available if you wanted to take them. Next is role-playing. Shall we start with Tyler, because he sounded so excited for that category?
Mm-hmm. Role-playing, I gave it a nice 7. Mostly because I think the theme is what allows the role-playing to happen. The theme is well-established. The setting's well-established. So I think that's the main reason why role-playing is much easier. Especially since it's like kind of a nice break, because you have like the crunchiness of combat, and then you can just go back on role playing and just kind of relax a little bit. I personally am not a very big / good role player, so I'm sure my score is going to be different than most other people, but I've watched Westerns, and it's easy to just go into those typical stereotype of things, and you know what you're getting into kind of in a way, so it makes it really easy to get into the whole game. Nick?
I gave roleplay a 6 for a lot of the same reasons I gave exploration a 6. Although I do very much agree with you, Tyler, in that the setting, just saying Weird West, and, for some people you might have to explain what the weird in that phrase means specifically, but just that phrase alone tells you a lot about the setting.
Wild West.
And
that's
that actually... Well, I mean, Wild West plus weird, spooky stuff. That's pretty solid, foundation to, gave me a good idea of what the setting would be like in general, which definitely helped with role playing. So I guess I could agree. I could certainly agree with the 7, but again, I don't know if there's anything particularly special that we used in this game regarding role playing, apart from just leaning into the setting, which I thought was really fun. So
Really?
what?
Okay.
I mean,
Well, if you're referring to the fact that, if Rebecca's referring to the fact that she made a whole town with individual names.
No, that's not what I was getting at all, but I'll give my 2 cents later.
Now I'm feeling like I'm missing something here.
You are
That's
missing
okay.
a huge
You're
thing.
entitled to your
you're
opinion.
missing
it's fine.
so much stuff.
I'm just surprised.
Well,
I don't know
Personally,
either.
but that's okay.
Why don't you go next then?
Honestly, I gave the way this game emphasizes role playing as a factor in the game, I gave it a 9 out of 10. I feel like the way as in the GM side, the Marshal's Handbook, I mean, a lot of it is having them talk to people, and there's more interaction than I would say some games necessarily emphasize.
All right.
You guys talking, when you went into that village, I was just waiting to see if you guys asked the right questions to the right people and figured it all out. And that totally could have happened.
But instead, he wanted to throw dynamite.
He did.
Well, I mean, at the very beginning, when you first went into town, I was like, if they start asking the right questions, this could definitely... And I kind of tried to throw you a red herring with the Chupacabra, but, it very easily could have toppled my house of cards if you had made certain choices with role-playing. And role-playing is what gave you the clues to kind of solve the mystery, even if you were misled. Spencer.
I gave it an 8. I agree with Rebecca. I thought this game, perhaps more so than any other game that we've played, emphasizes role-playing. And I think a huge amount of that The only game that I would put in the same league would be Corporia. And the reason that I say that, and I think it's because these games, in these two particular games, a lot of the time the enemy or the bad guy or the antagonist is another sentient and self-aware being. Like when we go into town, we're talking with a lot of people who have their own opinions. And at the end of the day, it was people with their own opinions, albeit skinwalkers, who were the bad guys. Like they were still somebody that you could speak with and reason with. And we could have figured that out. I also think that there were a lot of mechanics that we didn't get into very much. Like gambling, that was specifically designed, or dueling. Those were two specifically designed mechanics that were based on role-playing that would add a huge amount of flavor that we just didn't get into. And I don't think there are many other games that have anything even on that level, or even with the forethought regarding them. And I really wish that we would have gotten into it, but, it wasn't the story. And that's what it is. If we would have played a different story, we probably would have, but I think we still had we still had a lot of fun with the role playing that we were able to do because of this game. GMing. I'll start with myself because I actually have thoughts on this. I gave it a 3 out of 10, and I say this is probably the thing that will stop the game from being played faster than anything else, which is finding a marshal who's actually willing to write and be in charge. Because it, just from my perspective of watching how much Rebecca had to do, the only game that was on that level was Wrath and Glory, with how much is going on. And especially in this game, I noticed that there wasn't a lot that players could do to make it faster or to make it easier. Whereas a game like Corporia or Numenera, there's a lot that a player can do to make the GM's job not very hard. But with this game, nah. No, the marshal is just basically gonna bear that cross alone. Nick, do you want to go? Did you have any thoughts?
No, I think you nailed it really well. It looked very clunky
go
to
ahead,
run.
Ty.
Being a person that had to run another very clunky game, I totally feel for you, because Wrath and Glory was just as clunky, and because it just had all these additional steps that you had to take that kind of didn't feel necessary to be able to play the game. But you did it well, so Rebecca, take it away. Unless Nick has Nick's one to say something.
You want to go first?
Sure, I'll go.
Non-players first?
Yeah.
Or non-GMers? All players first.
Perhaps I was my typical generous self here. I gave GMing a 6.
Wow. You obviously didn't marshal.
I love you.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it looks very challenging for a marshal, but
it'd be easy for Nick.
At the same time, it looked like they gave. So one of the criticisms we sometimes have about games is a game that doesn't give enough to a GM, right? Not enough stuff to play with, essentially. This game certainly has a lot, like their whole rather large GM marshal section. Albeit, I can certainly understand the criticisms that those sections, as well as the rest of the game, is rather complex. And I'm honestly surprised that Rebecca did as much preparation as she did on top of what the game already was.
Yeah, let's just say I took notes when I read the marshal side, and I wish I had more time to read the player side as well to have a better understanding of that for building non-player characters, but I just didn't have the time and dedication and commitment and care to do that, so...
That makes sense, though.
But I give it a 3 out of 10. I felt like there was There was a lot, and like, I mean, they gave you samples of some things, but like, instead of making up new stats for Chupacabra, I was like, Chupacabra is now basically a werewolf, because I just don't care enough.
That's true. You did struggle to find proper stat
It looked
blocks.
like there wasn't.
Well, I could have made them, but
for monster stats,
I thought the same thing.
it looked pretty barren, surprisingly enough.
Like the West itself.
they gave you, they gave you a few samples, but if you wanted anything that wasn't one of those, yeah, you basically just had to make it up yourself. And again, I just didn't have the time or inclination to actually put much effort into it, so I was like, they're now a modified werewolf. These guys are now slightly modified versions of this stat of this group of people in this town. And then flipping through the pages, I felt like the Marshal's Handbook could have potentially been organized a little better, or had like all of the stat stuff in the back again for easier flipping, like appendices.
Yeah, the appendix really sucked too.
Like
it was like so there was like nothing in it. It was so vague on all the topics.
The way
I would
that
have loved to see like cheat sheets and stuff at the back of that book too.
Dungeons and Dragons is a master at the appendices. Like
Yeah.
they are the gold standard that I wish other books were that good at.
So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. So next is
Sustainability.
Or
it cost or
Cost. Oops.
Next
Sorry.
is cost. I give it an 8 out of 10. I felt like it was pretty, for what it was, decent price.
Very decent.
It's not like buying it's not like buying a Dungeons and Dragons book where like you're definitely feeling
You
that
have to sell your
burn
first
a hole in your
born.
pocket.
I mean, we also got in the PDF for him, so.
Fair enough. But even, I feel like, I don't know. Anyway, I'll let Spencer go.
I give it a 7 out of 10. Same thing. It seemed like a pretty good price for what you got. Go digital if you're going to do it, though. Because I feel like digital versus book, if I remember right, it's about half the price or so. So, go digital.
Always digital. Never physical.
I buy all the physical D&D books. I don't know what you're talking about.
How dare
Nick
you?
is different. He's a different boy.
I speak
I
for the
need them.
He
trees.
speaks for the peeps.
I have bookmarks of the ones I use.
Nick, what do you think?
Okay. I
Money.
went a bit higher as well. I feel I have good reasons for it, though, this time. I gave cost a 9 because I was honestly impressed that something as deep and long and crunchy as the Deadlands book that we got was only $20 digitally on DriveThruRPG.
And thorough.
I expected-
well done compared to Wrath and Glory, because that is crunchy and deep,
but not well
but
made.
terrible.
Also, this game has been out
Yeah,
for 20 years now?
25
years.
So, like,
So
in addition though, like I briefly browsed the rest of the like other Deadlands stuff, and like you can get, for example, the Deadlands Noir book for $10 digital. You can get other stuff for, you can get bits and pieces for $10 to $20 each, again digital. But you can kind of like pick and choose, and for the amount of stuff and amount of game you're getting, with depth and all that. That's honestly a pretty good value. The reason why I didn't make it a 10, however, was that it's if it's not much of an investment of a cost in money, it is a cost in time to learn all of it perfectly.
that's a way to think about it.
So I mean, I know that this criteria is mainly focused on like money, because that's a big factor with people considering games.
But time is money.
But yeah, that is something you should consider if you are interested in Deadlands. It is cheap, but are you willing to invest the time to really, really get into it as well? Because
Yes.
we had fun. I mean, to be fair, we had fun, and we didn't even go that deep into all it had. And so maybe that could be worth it for you. So
Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler.
I thought for the amount of stuff that you get, it was like an 8. I agree with Nick in the fact that like the time value is very pricey because you do have to read a lot and you have to learn all the rules and like all that kind of junk. And Spencer made some really nice cheat sheets that kind of moved everything along much faster, which helped
Those
a ton.
are honestly lifesavers in the flow of the show.
I do think that games need to like do that more often. I think have some kind of like flow charts or like well written examples that kind of like explain more complicated mechanics. But I mean, you got like a pretty large game for pretty good price, so I would say it's fairly well off. I mean, it had 20 years to make it, so that also helps a ton. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Sustainability?
Spencer, start us up.
Sustainability, again, is a little bit of a tricky criteria to explain in so many words, but essentially it's how long you could play the game and how well the game plays into what it's meant to be. So a one-shot game can easily be a 10 if it's well designed and it's replayable and it's worth it. So I gave this game an 8 out of 10 because of the fact that it is part 1 of a trilogy or a quadrilogy, depending on how you see the books. And I thought that was interesting that you can continue, maybe not with the same characters, but with the same theme over multiple books. I thought that was cool. And this was my issue was that prevented it from being higher was the same reasons that Rebecca had for her complaints in the GM section, is it didn't seem like the marshals had as many resources. And then I also thought that having somebody who's willing to be marshal for an extended period of time in this game seems like a big ask. And I sincerely think that would really prevent you from actually being able to play it for a long amount of time, because as much fun as a player would have, I think it would almost be a prison sentence for the marshal. Because I mean, seriously, like it is quite the investment of time and energy, and it isn't like a lot of other games where you can zone out as the marshal. You have to be very, very present to everything that's going on because there's so many little mechanics that are going into it. So I gave it an 8 out of 10, but I would actually put it like between 7 and 8. Let's go with Nick.
Okay. I entirely agree with Spencer. I also went with 8 because this game could very well sustain a pretty decently sized campaign. Or, I think it's also fairly flexible as well in that, like, we were able to have a good, like, we were able to have a pretty good, story and everything in 10 episodes. Although, then again, we felt 11 episodes. In those 11 episodes, we didn't feel we dove deep enough into the game. We could have gone further as well. This definitely does not feel like a one-shot game.
No.
So, but
not.
it's also clearly not trying to be. But yeah, what's preventing me from giving it a 10 is similar to what Spencer said. It might be a bit, like, depending on how invested the people, like the players are, and especially the marshal is in this game, it may feel like a slog if you're not really prepared for it. If you're not really prepared to, like, to go through the combat process as often as you do, which can be a bit of an ordeal with all the cards and the procedures and figuring out, like, where you hit and all that stuff. But yeah, if that's your thing, then great. Pretty good. Let's go with Tyler.
I gave this a 6. I would say it was kind of just mediocre for longevity. The main reason I kind of gave it kind of an average score is because the characters, there's not a lot in terms of like upgrading them. Like you get to improve your skills and like your attributes and all that kind of stuff, but there's not really any like new flavorful like abilities or things that you can gain by playing more. And there might be, I just might have missed it, but I don't think there is. Second, in terms of, it's kind of in the same situation as Wrath and Glory when we talked about that, and the fact that the bestiary is not extensive. Like Pathfinder and D&D, they, I feel like, have more longevity because there's so many options of things that you
Hundreds of monsters.
you can fight, like monsters. You have like different adventure paths with even unique stuff in that too, and traps and things like that. And so I feel like if you wanted to play a very long campaign for this game, the Marshal would have to put in a lot of work to make new monsters that could keep the players entertained enough. But in terms of like combat crunchiness, I think that's like the main thing that would keep me playing, because it is interesting. What would I like there to be some more abilities that the players could use? Yeah, but I do like the quickness with the cards and having multiple turns. I thought that was really cool. Is there anything else I'm missing? I thought I had one more thing in my noggin. Nope, must not be important. So, don't want to play this one shot ever. Man, you'd have to waste so much time reading this just for one session. Screw that, man. I'm out.
Heck no.
Yeah.
I think with the game itself, kind of, it doesn't. My guess is that it doesn't have an extensive bestiary because you aren't really going to fight beasts or monsters like you do in a lot of other games. I think it's more of against people. Yeah. You know, there was the whole dynamic of traveling that we didn't get into, and the crazy railroads. But
I do agree with you that the setting and the theme give ample opportunity to have a very extensive and very interesting story. I think that's another strong suit that it has. Like, and you could base everything off U.S. history as it was and then just modify it to fit your crazy story. But they already give you tons of material for really interesting things. So I think that's like the big strength that it has. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Did everyone else already talk about longevity? I think Rebecca hasn't.
No.
Spencer has. Okay,
it's just
Rebecca,
me.
hit us with that knowledge.
It keeps picking you. After Spencer picks him, it's become a pattern.
I did not pick up on
picked
that.
you once. Come on.
It's all good. Yeah, once. Anyway, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I do feel like, I mean, it would be nice to have more monster stats, yes, but then it does also place a lot of emphasis. Like, it has the different regions, and then it gives you a little bit of background on the regions and who the big players are in there. In the Marshal side, and whether they're aligned with the Deadlands or not. So, like, you have, you go further west to, like, Utah and California, and you have some, like, spiritual leaders who are, at least one of them, totally working on the side of fear, trying to spread fear and evil and bring the Deadlands into the real world. So... But it does have a fair amount of variety when you take in the whole of the United States and how there's going to be different challenges in different environments depending on where you're at. But it is also, again, it could very easily get repetitive, and as the GM, you definitely have to commit.
I think what Ty said about leveling up and getting new abilities is the biggest impediment that I hadn't even considered.
It's just like the only leveling up is just using your chips to increase skills and attributes, and I think there was like one other thing, but that's kind of the gist of it. Like, there's no like shoot your gun faster or like be able to hit and run and hit things, or like a dodge roll that you can move and dodge at the same, like stuff like that to add some more layers to the already kind of not clunky, but what's the right word? Like options in combat and story and such, I think that would have been one thing that they could have implemented that would have added a whole level of complexity that would have made it more fun. But
So Tyler, want to start us off for your overall?
Overall is a little bit different than the other ones. We give it like a dice value basically. So it doesn't mean you couldn't have fun with it. It just means that the game has more or less potential.
We think it had, or we think it like a larger dice means we think it has more potential to be fun for more people.
Yes, exactly. Nick always explains it very well. So ranging from a D4 to a D100, I think was like the max.
Yeah.
I would probably give it like a D10 probably. I wouldn't say it's like D20 level. I wouldn't say it's like a freaking out of the ballpark either. But very fun, great setting, has interesting combat that can keep you entertained, but it also lacks a lot of options in combat, and it lacks like character progression. Yeah, D10. You could have a good time with it. Spencer.
I agree exactly. I gave it a D10. There's a lot that's good about this game, but the ability to continue with it, to convince a Marshall to continue, to have the incentive to advance characters, there's enough that just kind of limits the game that would prevent it from being a higher score. Not saying it's a bad game. I really enjoyed it, and I would like to play it again. I think playing a different storyline with different characters would be a lot of fun, but it was a D10 for me. Nick?
Okay. So, I chose a D12, actually.
Wow.
And so D10 is pretty much like the exact average between the 7 dice, right? But I think it has a potential. So, I mean, I think it has potential. I think it has a little more potential depending on the group, because I could see some groups really liking this sort of thing. I was already sold on the setting personally. I was already sold on some of the unique things with the cards and chips. I personally got a bit lost with the depth of the mechanics, or the crunchiness of the mechanics, how kind of involved it was at each step of the way. But honestly, that I recognize that's more of a personal preference, and there are groups out there and people out there, I think, that really like that kind of thing. Like Tyler kind of steers a little more towards that, and there could be other people who really lean into that sort of gameplay. And if so, a compelling setting with that kind of gameplay could be very, very fun for them. And also, I think D12 is kind of fitting because a D12 is a dice that is not very well used in Dungeons & Dragons. It's really cool to have if you do have it, but not a lot of people use it because you just don't quite get there, right? And I think that's a good representation of some of the hurdles that we see, the learning curve and the time investment in this game. But if you do, and if this is your kind of game, I think this is fantastic. Rebecca,
yeah,
I chose you again.
I was split between a D10 or D12. I overall decided to D12. I think it was it was a fairly fun game. I like the setting. I like how easy it is to make your own scenarios or event. It was pretty easy for me to come up with something and make it work in this setting when I knew what I wanted. But yeah, it's definitely not like D20, D100 material.
Yeah.
So it's not Wrath and Glory, but
it's too much work.
It's not Wrath and Glory, but it's also
hard.
Not Legend of the Five Rings, basically.
Yeah. I think we're all saying more or less the same thing, and it just hits that's sweet spot.
If you want to play
that should be a D11
horror game, do it.
Yeah.
It's a solid.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was a good game that I would play again for sure. If we could get Rebecca to GM again,
I would kindly let someone else take that post.
Hey, maybe I'll do
Actually,
it.
I don't know if I would
We
wanna...
can play up on Roll20, and we can have a nice little battle map too. It'd be dope.
Except then I'd have to read the other half of the
you'd
book.
get the whole bookshelf.
In that case, we may as well just go for Blood and Iron.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. I think that's it. I think that's all we have to say about this season. It was a lot of fun. very
It was a
glad
great
that we
season,
played it.
all around. Yeah.
Stay tuned for next announcements.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Jared.
Do you like podcasts?
I love podcasts. Why do you ask?
Do you like podcasts with two guys who talk about films?
I do.
Yeah, because I feel like not a lot of podcasts do that.
I don't think so either.
It's like a new, cool thing. So I heard
It
this
is.
podcast called The Indie Film Review, where these two guys talk about independent films.
Wow.
Pretty
See, I
neat, huh?
love independent film.
And they talk about low budget, no budget films. They'll literally review anything because they're desperate for attention.
What are the hosts like?
One's really sexy and talented, and the other one's just kind of there. The Indie Film Review.
Necropodicon. Hard to pronounce, easy to listen.
I'm having a marvelous day.
Dun, da, 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 da.